The day Nadine Okoye stood at the edge of that pool in Edmonton and heard the regional director say, "Girls like her don't belong at trials." She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just pulled her swim cap down over her ears so she wouldn't have to hear whatever came next. That was the thing about Nadine. She had learned very early that silence was not the same as surrender. She was 23 years old, the daughter of a night shift nurse, and a man who had left when she was 4, and she had been swimming since she was 6. Since the afternoon her mother, Dr. Abena Rose Okoye, had walked her to the community pool on 118th Street and said quietly, the way she said most things, "The water doesn't care who you are. Remember that." Nadine had stepped in, and she had never really stepped out. But that afternoon in Edmonton, standing in front of Regional Director Mr. Paul Hemsworth, with her qualifying time printed on a sheet of paper in her hand. 56.4 seconds in the 100-meter butterfly, which was not just good enough, it was the second fastest time recorded in Alberta that year. She felt the old familiar weight of something she didn't yet have a word for. Not anger, not shame, something older than both. Hemsworth had not looked at her qualifying sheet. He had looked at her, and then he had said what he said, and turned back to his clipboard, and that was apparently that. The woman standing beside him, Assistant Coordinator Miss Renata Pilcher, had cleared her throat and looked at a spot somewhere above Nadine's left shoulder. She hadn't disagreed. She hadn't agreed, either. She had simply chosen the particular cruelty of saying nothing. There are moments that split a life cleanly in two, before and after. Nadine would think about this one for years. She had grown up in Sherwood Park, in a house that always smelled like Dettol and jollof rice, which was an unusual combination, but one that made her feel, even now, completely safe. Her mother worked double shifts at the Royal Alexandra. Her mother worked double shifts and still found time to pack Nadine's swim bag every Tuesday and Thursday. Still found time to sit in the viewing gallery with a cup of Tim Hortons coffee. Still found time to say, after every single practice, "How did it feel today?" Not "how did you do?" How did it feel? Nadine had not understood as a child what a gift that question was. Her coach at the Sherwood Park Kinsman had been a retired swimmer named Coach Beverly. Not Ms. Beverly, not Coach Whitmore, just Coach Beverly, which was how she introduced herself to every new kid and how she stayed in your head. Coach Beverly had spotted something in Nadine's stroke at age 9 that no one else had seen, a natural rotation in the shoulders that most butterfly swimmers spent years trying to develop. "You were made for this," she had said. She had not as praise, as information. Nadine had trained with Coach Beverly for 12 years. She had missed birthday parties and school dances and one very important New Year's Eve because of training, and she had not regretted any of it, not once, not even slightly. Because the water was the one place in the world where nobody was looking at her and seeing something other than what she was. In the water she was just speed, she was just time. She had clocked her first sub-57 split at 21, her first sub-56.5 at 22. By the time she showed up to the Alberta provincial trials with her application form and her qualifying documentation and her 56.4, she believed, truly, fully, without a shred of performative modesty, that she had earned her place at the national table. She had done the math. She had done the work. She had done the laps, thousands upon thousands of laps, in pools that smelled like chlorine and ambition, and sometimes mildew because the Kinsman facility needed new ventilation. But you trained where you trained. And then Paul Hemsworth had opened his mouth. She didn't tell her mother that night. She sat in the car in the parking lot of the Aquatic Center for 45 minutes, watching the light change over the river valley, and she thought about what Coach Beverly had told her once. "The people who try to stop you are always more afraid than you are. Don't give them your fear back. Keep it. Use it." She called Coach Beverly instead. He said what? Coach Beverly's voice was very still in the way that a lake is still just before a storm. He said, "Girls like me don't belong at trials." A long silence. "And your time?" 56.4. Another silence. Then, "Nadine, You know what that time means. I know what it means. Then we know what we're doing next. What they did next was file a formal complaint with Swimming Canada. They documented everything. The quote, the date, the witness, Miss Renata Pilcher, who when contacted by the National Body's Equity Office, turned out to be slightly more willing to corroborate the incident than she had been willing to stop it in the moment. They attached the qualifying sheet. They attached Nadine's full training history. Coach Beverly wrote a 3-page letter that was, by all accounts, surgical. The process took 4 months. 4 months during which Nadine kept training, because what else do you do? 4 months during which she swam her laps and timed her splits and ate her meals and slept her hours and did not even once let herself consider the possibility that nothing would come of it. She could not afford that thought. She had learned, somewhere along the way, that hope is not passive. Hope is a decision you make at 5:30 in the morning when the alarm goes off, and the pool water is cold, and the outcome is uncertain, and you get up anyway. Her mother found out in month 2, when she noticed the Swimming Canada letterhead on the kitchen table. "Tell me," said Dr. Nadine Okoye, and sat down and waited. Nadine told her, all of it. Her mother listened without interrupting, which was something she was very good at. When Nadine finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you need from me? Not I'm sorry this happened. Not that's terrible. Not even I'll make some calls. Just, what do you need from me?" "Just keep coming to practice," Nadine said. Her mother nodded. "Of course." The complaint was upheld in month 4. Paul Hemsworth was formally reprimanded and removed from his role as regional director. The reprimand was quiet, as these things tend to be: a letter, an internal review, a restructuring that everyone in the room understood the meaning of even when they didn't say it aloud. Miss Renata Pilcher received a written warning and was required to complete equity and inclusion training, which Nadine imagined she completed with precisely the same careful blankness she had deployed in that corridor in Edmonton. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. What mattered most was the letter that arrived from Swimming Canada's National Selection Committee, which had reviewed Nadine's qualifying documentation independently and concluded, unambiguously, that she was eligible for the national trials. She read it 3 times, standing in the hallway with her coat still on. Then she called Coach Beverly. "I know," Coach Beverly said. "Before Nadine could speak, I got the same letter. Now, how much time do we have?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks is not a lot of time. It is also, if you have spent 12 years preparing for a specific moment, exactly enough. Nadine trained twice a day. She trained in the early morning when the aquatic center was empty and the only sounds were the ventilation system and the water and her own breathing. She trained in the late afternoon, when the Junior Orb Club kids were in the adjacent lane and sometimes splashed her. And she didn't mind because the distraction was useful, because you couldn't guarantee silence as a national trial. You had to learn to move through noise. She watched footage. She adjusted her entry angle by 3 degrees, based on something Coach Beverly had noticed in her stroke that she had been meaning to address for months. She slept 8 hours. She ate the things her body needed. She called her mother every night. There was a moment, 3 weeks before the trials, at 6:15 on a Wednesday morning, when she was halfway through a set of 400-meter repeats, and her shoulders were burning, and the water felt heavier than usual, and she thought, suddenly, and completely without warning, about Paul Hemsworth's face when he had said what he had said. The expression, not anger, certainty. The particular certainty of someone who has never once been asked to account for what he believes. She finished the repeat in 55.8, her fastest ever. Coach Beverly, watching from the deck, did not say anything for a moment. Then, write that one down. Nadine pulled off her goggles. "I know, whatever you just thought about, bottle it." Nadine looked at the lane line. "Yeah," she said, "I will." The national trials were held in Winnipeg, at the Pan-Am Pool, which is a serious building in the way that serious things tend to announce themselves quietly. It smells like every other pool in the world, which is to say, it smells like chlorine and effort, and the particular nervousness of athletes, who have spent years getting to a room they've only ever imagined. Nadine arrived the day before. She walked the deck. She stood at the starting block for lane 4, which was where she'd been assigned. And she looked at the water and she thought, the water doesn't care who you are. She slept 7.5 hours. She ate oatmeal. She put on her cap and her goggles, and she did not let herself think about anything except the 56.4 that had already happened, and the 55.8 that had happened since. And the fact that her body knew what to do, had always known what to do, had been knowing what to do since she was 6 years old, and her mother had walked her to a pool and told her the truth about water. The women's 100-meter butterfly final. The women's final, separate and distinct and exactly as it should be, with 8 women in 8 lanes, all of them earned, was the 4th event of the afternoon session. There was a moment, just before the start signal, when the pool went completely quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The specific quiet of a held breath. 8 women on 8 blocks, coiled and ready, and the crowd in the gallery watching, and the officials at their stations, and the timing system armed, and the universe indifferent to everyone's preference about how this would go. Nadine thought about nothing. The signal fired. She entered the water, at an angle she had adjusted 3 degrees 6 weeks ago, on the advice of a woman who had believed in her for 12 years. She found her rhythm in the first 15 meters, which was earlier than usual, which was a good sign. Her dolphin kick was clean. Her pull was long. She breathed on the right side on the 3rd stroke as planned. At the 50-meter turn she was, by her own sense of it, slightly ahead of where she needed to be. She didn't press. Pressing was the mistake. She had learned that at 19, when she had pressed at the 50 and blown up at 75 and finished 5th, she did not press. She settled. She let the stroke do what the stroke had been trained to do. She trusted 12 years of 5:30 mornings and cold water, and a coach who never once told her that girls like her didn't belong. The final 25 meters were something she would struggle to describe afterward, because describing them required language, and language is imprecise. And what happened in those 25 meters was not imprecise at all. It was exact. It was the sum of every decision she had made and every morning she had gotten up and every moment she had kept hope as a deliberate act rather than a passive feeling. She touched the wall. She looked up at the scoreboard. 55.61. A new personal best. A new provincial record. 3rd in the country. 3rd in the country meant she was going to trials. 3rd in the country meant her name would go on a list. 3rd in the country meant that a lot of things. But the first thing it meant, the very first thing before all the others, was this. She had been right. She had always been right. About herself, about her stroke, about the 56.4 on that piece of paper that Paul Hemsworth had not bothered to look at. She pulled her goggles off. She pressed them against her forehead. She breathed. In the gallery, somewhere up in the 3rd row, a woman in navy scrubs, who had come straight from a 12-hour shift and had not had time to change, stood up and put both hands over her mouth. There is a particular kind of justice that does not arrive loudly. It does not come with an announcement, or an apology, or a formal acknowledgement from the people who were wrong. It comes quietly, the way water fills a space, completely, inevitably, without asking permission. Nadine Okoye did not need Paul Hemsworth to see her swim. She did not need him to feel bad. She did not need anything from him at all. That was the thing he had never understood about her. About any of the people he had looked at and decided he already knew. They weren't asking for his permission. They had never been asking for his permission. Coach Beverly met her at the ladder when she climbed out. She handed her a towel and didn't say anything for a moment, which was very like her. Then, "How did it feel?" Not "how did you do?" How did it feel? Nadine took the towel. She thought about the water at 6:15 on a Wednesday morning, and the burning in her shoulders, and the 55.8, and the expression on her mother's face in the gallery that she had seen even from the pool, even through the crowd, even without looking directly. She had felt it. Somehow, the way you can feel when someone who loves you is in a room. It felt, she said, and paused and looked back at the water, like exactly what it was supposed to feel like. Coach Beverly nodded. Good, she said. Then we do it again. And they would. They would do it again, and again after that, in pools in Winnipeg and Montreal, and eventually, places that had not yet announced themselves. Because that is what happens when you keep showing up. The world eventually runs out of reasons to tell you no. Some people will watch Nadine Okoye's career unfold and call it a comeback, but there was no coming back. She had never gone anywhere. She had just been waiting, the way the water waits, quietly, completely, without asking anyone for permission to be exactly what it is.